Hello, so everybody please log into the wonderful screen.io because I'm starting up with a question. And it's going to be a wonderful one. And the moment I get control over my slides, I'll try to put that on the screen. So, this is going to be a bit of a puzzler for you. Do you trust the powered-on computer controlled by another person to act according to your interests? So, the answer is on the screen. There's a yes and no option. It should be easy. So, keep on going. I'll continue my slides because it's a short talk. And it's slightly ahead of time anyway. So, my talk is about sharing data with strings attached. I'm the head of Privacy Technologies Department at Cybernetica, a relatively experienced company in Estonia that has built a lot of the stuff that Siim told you about in the plenary session, like the X-Road and things like that. So we built a lot of that technology. We have a lot of in-house crypto experience, so that really helps. There's a bit of a background I need to share with you here, which might a bit affect your answers here, but cybersecurity has always been an afterthought. I'm not talking about computers for a while, let's talk about networks and data sharing over networks. So in 1968, when BBN Technologies in the US started building the ARPANET, the first packet switch network that actually enabled today's internet as it is, making stuff more scalable than connecting cables in stations. Then in 1 year, there were 4 nodes on the internet, which were universities. And that was a great time. There was literally nothing to steal on that network. It was great. It was beautiful. So everybody's thought that the future is going to be a couple of supercomputers. Nobody was going to need more than 512 kilobytes of memory, and it was beautiful times. Ease of use and copying data and scaling the system, making the computers and the networks a virally growing system was a lot more important than building security in. So this is where we are today. Today's computers and all the data processing and the data analytics is built for such computers where copying is easy. There's another good meaning for the once only principle, which is once you leak your data, then all the rest of the leakages are free. And the second problem is that with data protection, you have the same assumption that today's data protection assumes that the computers are like that. But this doesn't need to be the case. Maybe we would have less restrictions in regulation. We wouldn't have a GDPR panic if computers had been built differently, but maybe then we would have 10 computers and 512 kilobytes of memory. So, let's have a look at the answers. We have 27 people who wouldn't trust that computer and 9 people who do. Thank you for the answers. Now we have 10. So it's about a quarter and 3/4 difference. Thank you for that. I don't have a very strong personal position. I think we can build computers that act in your interest, so I'm not so worried about that. So let's talk about today's data flows and the data protection paradigm caused by these kinds of computers. That's me. I have the MyData thing. Everybody's doing MyData. I have data and sharing terms, the policies, with whom, for what purpose, whether it's an emergency, whether my doctor can see it, and so on. In return, I get service and some promises. We won't do X and blah with your data, which is very reasonable. That's all the consent, purpose, and so on. There's the service provider. In the regulatory terminology, they are the controller of the data. And they may sometimes use third-party processors. Again, they pass the data to them for processing with some terms and conditions. So you cannot do this, you cannot do that, and so on. And again, they get results and promises back. So the promises are that nothing will leak. But because computers are built like they are, then sometimes something leaks. And there is, once you've shared, once you've made the copy, there is no way to pull this back. You don't have any way to control your information once it has been shared. Given that 3/4 of you said that you wouldn't trust a powered-on computer that another person is controlling, then it somehow derives that you wouldn't trust that person to also handle the sharing of your data. But this is somewhat contradictory to the whole MyData thing, so I'm not going to pursue that point further. I believe that we can build trustworthy systems, and I'm just trying to help people do so. So the question is, can we do better? And now this is story time. So in Estonia, people tell you it's a great IT state, life is beautiful, there's a lot of great services, startups and things, so somebody has to build that. So 2014 there was a study. We found out that around 40% of IT students in higher education institutions do not graduate in time, meaning that these are the folks who should be building your secure, user-friendly, everything systems. They don't actually finish school before they do that, and they still do that. So that's a concern. So the question is, why does this happen? The nice big data way for answering that question would be, so you go to the data, you look at the tax records, has the student worked, when was it an IT company maybe even, and whether they have learned, whether it was an IT curriculum, so what happened. So this data exists. It's held in tax records, who knows when you have, and in education records, where they know when you have studied. So why not merge this together, get a nice answer to this? We would have a greater good, common good, maybe build a better economy while doing that. The problem is that there are barriers to this. And the thing is, it's infeasible to go to each of the people and ask them to share. You just can't get very many people today. Might change in the future when all these platforms and things pick off, but today we're not there. So today the trick would be to maybe somehow get the data controller to process that data without breaching privacy. And that's exactly what we did. Now, before I tell you about the solution, I have a backup question as more. So what do you think is the relation between working and not graduating the university on time? There are three options. Pick the one you believe the most. Options are, working increases the probability of graduating, working is not correlated with not graduating on time, and working reduces the probability that you graduate university on time. And I'm talking working during studies. Right, so get on answering that, I'll continue with the discussion. So, ShareMind is a privacy-preserving data analytics system that collects confidential data from a number of sources, analyzes it without seeing that, and gives you new knowledge, new insights, without ever seeing any of the input values. It's achieved using cryptography, asking for details at the break. So, what we did, we shipped the Ministry of Education and Research and the Tax Authority an importer tool that let them import 10 million tax records and 600,000 education records for about 20,000 students. Half of them were IT and the other were non-IT, to have a reference in case control groups. So ShareMind is a distributed system. There is no single party controlling the data, meaning that there were three hosts. The Estonian Information Systems Authority, they run the government. The Ministry of Finance IT Center, they do IT for the Tax and Customs Board, and Cybernetica. We don't need to be in the picture, but in that case we were learning about deployments and things. So all of us had only encrypted versions of these records. None of us were able to reconstruct because none of us had the key. The thing is here, the key is split among those organizations so that none of them could individually recover the data they got from the government agencies. So, and then, because I know a lot more about crypto than I know about economics, then we had an actual applied research company with PhDs in economics doing the study. They asked the questions, so they did the merging, sorting, grouping, aggregation, statistics, built the nice plots, wrote a 20-page report about what happened, and gave that to the policymakers, the companies, the universities. The result was, spoiler alert, no clear relation between working during studies and not graduating. So that option 2 was more or less correct. The first option was correct for a group of people. Apparently, if you work full-time, then you're more probable to graduate than if you do odd jobs. That's peculiar, I know, but maybe this is about the cannot really stay in one place for too long situation. That is the common intuition, yes. But the thing is that IT students and non-IT students have a very similar employment ratio, also over time, including the economic crisis in 2008 and 2009. And they still have different graduation rates. So we couldn't figure out the reason. The first hypothesis that there is a correlation, we didn't find that. So Why am I here telling you about that study? We planned on doing this. We went to ask for permission from the Data Protection Agency. They looked at what we are doing, asked for explanations, tried to understand the data flows and the technology, and said that we can't give you permission because what you're doing is not in the law. And at that point, they basically made a claim that we are not processing personal data because the personal data does not exist outside the data owner organization, which is a very nice precedent, you see, because technically we had a bit of a blank sheet for doing whatever we wanted to do until we don't have any personal records in the outputs, and that's the key part. In this particular study, the results were statistics, very general, over tens of thousands of people, nothing individual. So if you, I'm trying to give you the take-home message that you can sometimes do stuff without really asking the permission from everyone if you're doing statistics. That's one of the key points here. The internal oversight of the Tax and Customs Board was a little bit more skeptical. They don't only abide by data protection, they also have tax secrecy, which is a whole separate can of worms. But they did a bit of a code reviewing, played with an example installation, and then still agreed to put actual records into the system. So that was a project we did about 2 years ago. Since then, we've been able to do more. We've been studying how pupils with special education survive in the labor market and so on. There's a lot of greater good projects we've been able to do. So, for the future, this might give you a model for reuse and sharing of existing data that you have collected with absolute privacy. So I'm still talking to the service provider, and there is I give consent, there is a purpose for which they're collecting the data from me, they are doing something reasonable. However, the point is that when the information goes to a third party using secure computing for processing, then it can go there in an encrypted fashion without the third party being able to decrypt. Yes. So that's one of the story that we essentially built here, where two governmental controllers were able to share with a third-party researcher without any privacy leakages and problems. And now this model can be extended, which is the last slide. You can also think of data market kind of architectures, which is a lot closer to the MyData principle here, where you are sharing encrypted data about yourself, and the others are doing the same. And there is the platform, a market kind of situation, data broker, that allows these to be merged, processed, without seeing anything, but just working blindly with the database without leaking anything. So that was the main thing I wanted to tell you about. Thank you very much for your time.